What's up everybody, I'm Nate Beck and I'm here today with YesWelder, and today we're going to be making a horseshoe wine rack. This is going to be a two-part video series and we're going to utilize YesWelder's MP200 multi-processing machine and tell you why this is a great and easy project for welders of all levels to do. Whether you're a novice or an experienced welder, you get an awesome product at the end and it's fun to mix up different processes and further hone your skills. So we're going to dive right into this. This is going to be a horseshoe wine rack made out of just regular standard horseshoes bought at like the local supply store. The one thing you want to think about when you're buying the horseshoes though is they have to be big enough to have a wine bottle in them. So usually size 1 or above is your best bet. So once you do that, you need 10 of them. You're gonna need the MP200. You're gonna need a couple squares and a welding table, and that's pretty much it. What I love about this project is there's not much measuring to do. You can pretty much dive straight into the welding. So for the first part, we're going to be making the sides on the bottom of the wine rack using the lift TIG process. If you're not familiar with TIG, you're gonna have a TIG torch in one hand. It's gonna have your electrode in it, and then you're gonna have your filler rod in the other hand, and basically be heating the base metal with your torch and using the filler rod to fill it in. Now this is lift TIG. If you've TIG welded like with a pedal before, it's gonna be a little bit different. I'll walk you through the differences as we go. But the first things first, we gotta set the machine up. So we're gonna head over there. All right, so here we are with the MP200. Here's the basic menu. And like I said, this is a multi-process machine and we're gonna have to get to lift TIG. So we're gonna use this dial right here. We're on stick right now. There's MIG, flux core, and lift TIG. So we're gonna click the middle of it to go into lift TIG. And then here's where we're gonna have our settings adjustment. We're gonna use this one to adjust our amps. I like it at 80 amps for this project. That feels pretty good. And then I am using the 220 volt outlet. This machine can run on 110 and there is an adapter that comes with it. It's a powerful little puppy and you have a lot of flexibility with this machine, which is what I love about it. But for this one right now, we do have it in 220. We're gonna roll. All right, so the first thing we're gonna need to do before we actually start welding is clean these up a little bit. Now, I said this is a great project for novices because none of this is load bearing. So if your weld doesn't penetrate that well, or maybe there's a little bit of porosity, or weld gets a little dirty a little bit, it's gonna be okay. All it has to do is hold a bottle of wine. So that is what's great about this project, to get used to the different processes. Now, these are horseshoes, so they're pretty dirty. They've got just some mill scale and crap on them. So we're gonna take a red Scotch-Brite pad and we're gonna clean up the edges here where we're gonna weld, and then we're also gonna clean up the bottom because that's where we're gonna weld as well. Now, normally with TIG, you have to get things very, very, very clean. Because of that, you don't want to get a dirty weld. With this, again, it only has hold a bottle of wine, so we're not going to be super, super worried about it, but we are going to take a little bit of care. There's one. And then we're going to do the other one on the opposite, right? So for this one, I did this side and the bottom. So for this one, I'm gonna do this side and the bottom because that's what's gonna mate right there. And we are going, the groove side of the horseshoe is gonna go down. So we got that side done. So we're gonna go like, so then we're gonna grab this side. There we go. Do our table a little clean. Now, like I said, what's great about this is there's not a lot of measuring to do or fabrication to do before we get to start welding, and this is where the two squares come in. So we're gonna take the open end of the shoe, we're gonna shove it against the square. Now we're gonna make sure the square is even on the edge of the table. We're gonna put this against the square and we're gonna line up the edge of the shoe with the edge of the table. All right, so we're mated here. Now we're gonna take the next shoe, again, groove side down. Do the same thing, make sure the two tips of the shoe are flush against the square, and then we're gonna mate in the middle right here. So this. All right, so here we are. We've got all these points touching the square. This is flush right here, and now we're gonna take this square and just slide it up here, just to double check and make sure everything's nice and even, and we did no measuring. So with like pedal TIG, right, your actual tungsten isn't live until you push forward on the pedal. Now this tungsten during lift TIG is live at all times, so you want to be really careful about where you lay this down, because if you lay this down and this tungsten hits any of this metal, it's going to start an arc. If we don't have our helmet on, it's going to essentially make us go blind a little bit for a moment. So we want to be really careful about where we're going to put this. That's why I like to hang it off the edge of the table. Now with lift start, what we're going to do is basically touch the tip of the tungsten to the workpiece and then slowly bring it up, and that's what's going to start our arc. And then our arc is going to burn at the amps that we set on the machine until we break the arc. Now when we finish our weld on a pedal machine, you would just click back. On this, actually, what I like to do is get another piece of steel and run the arc up onto that steel so the last bead of our weld is still protected by the shielding gas. So we're gonna run it up onto the steel and then just pull away, and that's gonna break the arc. So I'm gonna get my hood on and we'll lay the first couple beads. Now right before we start welding, we're gonna need to turn this gas valve on. Open that up to make sure there's argon shielding gas coming out of our gas lens. All right, so we've got one side done now. We're gonna unclamp everything and basically do the exact same thing for the other side. Set it the exact same way. Everything at the bottom, because actually for the base of it, this is gonna be, we're gonna try to do all the welds on the inside. So you can't really see the welds from the outside of the wine rack unless you look kind of on the in and kind of close. But that's why we're cleaning out the bottom as well. Now one thing to remember when you're clamping is that when you weld something, wherever that groove is that you're welding, it's gonna wanna pull it up. So that's why I'm clamping the outsides of the shoes, because as I weld this middle piece right here, the outsides are gonna wanna naturally pull up. If you clamp in the middle, it's not gonna have as much downforce, the clamp isn't, to fight the weld and the heat from the weld. So. Now again, I said this was like a good project for novices too, because these welds are small enough that if you don't clamp it in the right spot and it does get a little wonky, you can put it in a vise and adjust it a little bit. You might crack your weld to start over, but no worries at all. All right, let's weld. You don't have to go that far with the weld either. You're only putting down 3/4 of an inch maybe. I'll show you right now. All right, so we're gonna unclamp everything and now we're gonna do the bottom. Now the bottom's gonna be, the setup's gonna be a little bit different. So we're gonna actually take all of our clamps out. Now this is also a good time. You put down 2 welds to be like, is that amp setting right? Do I like the gas flow currently? Are we getting good color? Is it looking smoked out? Do we need to adjust anything? Now, the settings are working fine, but I would like for it to build up and go and flow a little bit more fluidly, so I'm gonna turn up my amps by about 15. All right, so for the bottom, we're gonna grab 2 more shoes and we're gonna be welding them together like this. So we're gonna need to clean off the top side on this one. So the groove side, because if we weld the bottom side and then it sits flat on a table, it's gonna rock kind of on the weld unless the weld's absolutely flat. So it's a little bit safer to weld this on the top side. Plus, on horseshoes, there's a natural little bevel right here on the top side, so that creates a beautiful little valley that weld just flows right into, and it looks and feels really good. So we're gonna clean off the groove side, which is gonna be our top side for this. Now the setup on this one's gonna be a little bit different because we want the ends of the horseshoe to be parallel with each other. Instead of welding this way and set up this way, we're now gonna set up across this way. So we're gonna take our first horseshoe, and just like the last one, we're gonna make sure the ends are touching on the square. And then we're gonna take our other horseshoe and the edge of the table. And we're gonna take our other horseshoe. This is when this square becomes really important. Make sure these ends are touching this square, touching the table, and then we slide the two squares together, and where it comes together right here, that's where we weld. All right, so we've got the base done. We've got the sides, but we're gonna add a top shoe here. Right up here. So we can make it a 3-bottle wine rack. But I like doing everything in pairs. So I like to do these and then go to the bottom and then go back and the last pair on the top. You can do it in a different order, but this is just how I've found is nice to do it. So to reset this up, we're gonna go back in, but now we're gonna flip it the other way. So before we had the tops of the shoes against the square this way, now we're gonna flip it this way. But same deal, we're gonna make sure these two tops now, or the two bottoms rather, are gonna be touching the square. We're gonna make sure the end here is flush with the table. And now we're gonna grab another shoe, and because we're gonna be essentially welding it in right there, we're gonna need to clean the bottom here. We're gonna clean these two tops, these two middle pieces right here. So now when we set it in, obviously because it's a round surface, we can, you know, it can spin and be uneven and all that kind of stuff. Again, this is where the squares are gonna come in. So you don't have to use math. I like to put my hand on the square to make sure that's flush against the table here. Pull these tight against here. Slide the top shoe in, and then slide this square up, and then slowly rotate this top shoe until both tops right here are gonna be touching the square. Make sure you push on the square right there to make sure that's all good. Now that's all even, and we can clamp it down. All right, now again, we're gonna be thinking about where we're gonna be clamping. Since we're welding here and here, this piece is gonna wanna fold up into like this. So I'm gonna throw a clamp right here to make sure this top shoe stays. And again, once we do this, we're gonna wanna make sure that the fitment is still nice and tight and even. Okay, I'm gonna go, now it's pulling up a little bit right here, so I'm going to place a clamp here. So force this back down. I'm gonna loosen this clamp just a little bit, just to make sure everything can stay flush. Tighten these together. Make sure everything is still nice and tight and even. All right, and now we're gonna have to clamp this down over here. Also, we gotta think about where our hands are gonna be too, ideally, because if we clamp everything and then we can't actually get into it, right? So I'm gonna be coming in here, so I can either clamp it here or somewhere in here, because I'm gonna have to keep in mind, I want this area open. So I think I'm gonna clamp it just so it stays out of my way. Up here. That should be good. And we're not putting that much heat into the workpiece because we're not welding it for a long time. The longer you are laying beads into a workpiece, the hotter it's gonna get, the more the heat's gonna want to affect it. Since we're not doing that much, I'm not super concerned with clamping here. If we were running really hot beads for a really long time, I would want to put a clamp over here just to make sure that didn't kick up. But with the little amount that we're doing, I think we're gonna be just fine. All right, so there we have it. We're done with the sides, we're done with the bottom. And now we can work on putting all of this together, which we're gonna do next week. And except instead of TIG, we're gonna use MIG. That way we can talk about the positives and negatives, when to use TIG, when to use MIG, how to choose, what the welds look like, why it's a little different, but why are both great processes you can use on the YesWelder MP200. So we're gonna get all the clamps out of here. Perfect. That's what that looks like. And next week we will be using the MIG process to weld that in there, that in there, and then put a little nice little end cap on it. So until then though, everybody, please like, please share, please subscribe, and we'll see you next week on the YesWelder YouTube channel.